And so, their story fades with the light of the setting sun. A princess who learned that love cannot be crowned, and a guide who carried her memory through every shadow of his life. Though duty called them apart, their hearts remained bound, not by vows or titles, but by the quiet promise whispered in the forest that love, once found, never truly fades. If you love royal romances, forbidden love stories, and heart-touching tales that linger long after the final word, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss our next royal story. The palace of Veloria was silent. Marble towers caught the first tendrils of sunlight, and the gardens, usually alive with chatter and music, lay empty, bathed in the soft glow of early dawn. Princess Ellie's breath hitched in the cold air as she tiptoed through the gilded hallways, her silk slippers silent against polished stone. Every door she passed was a reminder: duty, ceremony, expectation, and tomorrow she would have to stand before a prince she had never met, smile as if her heart belonged to another. But today was different. Today, she would steal a fragment of herself back. The eastern gates of the palace were heavy, carved with intricate filigree and the crest of her ancestors. Ellie's hands, trembling with both fear and exhilaration, pressed against the cold metal as she pushed them open. The forest lay beyond, dark, whispering, alive. It was a forbidden place, guarded by Rune and a handful of royal men, but to Ellie, it felt like the one place where her heartbeat could belong solely to her. She pulled her cloak tighter around her shoulders, the pale rose fabric catching the light like morning mist. The scent of dew-drenched flowers washed over her: jasmine, wild rose, and something she could not name but recognized as freedom. Each step along the forest path was both daring and intoxicating, her pulse drumming in her ears louder than the palace bells that were still asleep. And there he was, Rune, her guide, her secret, her anchor. He stood beside the old marble fountain, his silhouette outlined by the pale sun, water glimmering beneath his hand. Rune had always known the forest like no one else, every hidden trail, every secret clearing. He had watched over her as she played in these woods as a child, though she had never known how much he cared. Not in words, not in gestures large enough for others to see. "Ellie," he said softly, his voice low enough to merge with the rustling leaves. "You're early." She allowed herself a smile. "You could say the same, Rune, though I imagine the forest is kinder company than my court." He chuckled, the sound deep and steady, like river stones tumbling in the current. "The forest never asks for anything in return. The court demands everything." Ellie approached, slipping off her gloves and letting her fingers brush the edge of the fountain. The water shimmered with the pale reflection of dawn. For a moment she imagined that this pool could show her what lay ahead. Not the arranged marriage, not the endless obligations, but her own heart, unshackled. "Just Ellie," she murmured, setting her small crown aside on the fountain's edge. "Here, I am not a princess. Not yet. Not for anyone." "And I am not Rune," he replied, stepping closer, the forest between them narrowing like a stage set for a private performance. "Just your guide, your companion in the woods." Ellie felt a shiver, neither cold nor fear, but the thrill of intimacy, the closeness that had always existed between them, unspoken, restrained. Rune had been a constant in her life, a presence she often ignored out of necessity, but here, now, in this early morning hush, she could no longer. The wind carried a whisper through the trees, teasing the strands of hair escaping her braid. The light painted golden lines across Rune's face, and she realized how often she had noticed him in the past, in ways she never admitted, not even to herself. His eyes were calm, steady, yet there was a spark of something: amusement, worry, or perhaps the beginning of longing, that made her chest tighten. "You always know where to find me," she said softly. "I always know where to look," he replied, and she caught the faintest curve of a smile. They walked together along the forest path, careful not to disturb the soft moss underfoot. The air was thick with the scent of pine and wet earth, a grounding aroma that seemed to pull away all the trappings of palace life. Birds began to stir, their songs delicate and almost shy. Ellie breathed in deeply, filling her lungs with the wild, unstructured world she had longed for. "Do you ever think about freedom?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Rune's gaze met hers, unwavering. "Every day. But freedom is a dangerous thing when it comes at the wrong cost." Ellie laughed softly, a sound the forest seemed to drink in. "And yet, here I am. I choose it anyway." He shook his head, though his smile remained. "You are braver than you know. Or perhaps foolish. There is a fine line between bravery and folly." They reached a clearing, one Rune had shown her once as a child, where wildflowers swayed like gentle waves across a hidden pond. The water mirrored the sky, pale and golden. Rune knelt by the edge, his hand skimming the surface, creating tiny ripples that seemed to stretch endlessly. "This pond," he said quietly, "is said to reflect what the heart longs for most, but you must touch it willingly, without expectation." Ellie knelt beside him, her reflection mingling with his. The water trembled, as though aware of the tension between them, as though it too waited for what might unfold. "And what does your heart long for, Rune?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. He hesitated, the wind catching his hair. "Something I can never have," he admitted, the words soft but certain. Ellie reached out, her fingers hovering above the water, then letting them rest lightly against his. The contact was electric and tender all at once. "And if what you long for longs for you back?" she whispered. Rune's gaze faltered for the first time, a subtle vulnerability flashing across his features. "Then it would be the most dangerous thing I've ever desired." The forest held its breath. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, painting the two of them in a mosaic of light and shadow. Time seemed to slow, each heartbeat stretching into eternity. The moment was fragile, poised between possibility and impossibility, yet undeniable in its intensity. Ellie leaned closer, the warmth of his shoulder against hers, the faint scent of cedar and dew mingling in the air. No words were necessary. None could capture the gravity of that instant. The forest around them hummed softly, a witness to the awakening of hearts that had long waited in silence. But the palace would not wait. Bells far in the distance reminded Ellie that her escape, her stolen morning, would not last. She rose reluctantly, brushing a strand of hair from her face, her heart pounding in equal measures with exhilaration and dread. Rune remained kneeling, his hand still hovering over the water, a silent sentinel guarding the fragile moment they had shared. "Promise me you'll return," she said quietly. Rune looked at her, steady and unwavering. "I will always find you, Ellie, even if the world tries to keep us apart." She smiled faintly, a mixture of longing and fear, and for one heartbeat, the forest and the dawn, the fountain and the pond felt like theirs alone. The palace would call her back soon, but here, in the Garden of Dawn, Ellie tasted freedom, and the first whisper of a love that could not be named, yet would not be forgotten. The forest seemed to lean in as Ellie and Rune continued along the hidden trail, the undergrowth whispering beneath their steps. Every branch, every leaf, felt alive, part of the secret world they had claimed for themselves. Sunlight slanted through the trees, dappling the path with golden patches that shifted as the morning breeze stirred the canopy above. Birds flitted overhead, their songs hesitant, as if aware that something delicate, almost sacred, was unfolding below. Rune moved with practiced ease, his boots silent on the soft earth, leading her to places no one but he had ever known. Ellie watched him closely, the quiet strength in his posture, the way his gaze lingered on the path, yet seemed aware of every detail around him. There was something comforting, almost magnetic, in the rhythm of his movements. the certainty that he could guide her through any danger, though this journey carried a more subtle peril, the awakening of feelings they had long restrained. "Do you ever wonder," Ellie asked softly, "why these paths feel like they belong to us, even though no one else can tread them?" Rune glanced at her, a faint smile playing across his lips. "Perhaps because the forest recognizes honesty. It knows who you are, beyond titles and expectations." She let the words settle, feeling the weight of truth in them. Titles had defined her life for as long as she could remember, constraining her choices, her friendships, her laughter. But here, with Rune at her side, there were no crowns, no ceremonies, just two souls wandering a secret world. After a turn in the trail, the sound of water reached them, soft, insistent, a rhythm that drew them forward. The trees opened to reveal a pond hidden deep in the forest, a place she had never seen before. The surface was still, a perfect mirror of the sky, broken only by the occasional ripple of a falling leaf. Wildflowers crowded the banks, their petals brushing the water in gentle arcs, and the scent of damp earth mingled with the sweetness of hidden blooms. "This is it," Rune said, kneeling beside the water. His fingers skimmed the surface, creating tiny ripples that spread across the mirrored sky. "This pond has a legend. They say if you touch it with a heart unclouded by fear or deceit, it shows you what you long for most." Ellie knelt beside him, careful to keep her reflection close to his. She traced her fingers over the glassy surface, watching the water tremble. "And if your heart longs for something impossible?" she asked, her voice barely above the gentle lapping of the pond. Rune's gaze caught hers, unwavering. "Then it is the most dangerous desire one can hold. And yet—" He hesitated, his hand hovering above the water, not quite touching it. "I have longed for it anyway." Ellie's breath caught, her pulse quickening in a way that had nothing to do with the morning chill. She leaned slightly closer, her reflection mingling with his in the water. "And what is it you long for?" Rune's hand finally dipped into the pond, sending concentric circles rippling outward. "You," he said quietly, his voice carrying both certainty and restraint. "I have, for a long time." Ellie's heart thudded against her ribs, and for the first time in years words failed her. The truth, the dangerous, exhilarating, impossible truth, hung between them, suspended in the stillness of the pond and the golden morning light. She reached out, brushing her fingers lightly against his as they hovered above the water. The contact was fleeting, yet it carried a weight neither could deny. Sparks, delicate and subtle, seemed to ignite in the quiet air, and Ellie felt the sharp, thrilling ache of desire tempered by restraint. Rune's eyes softened, a vulnerability surfacing that few had ever glimpsed. "If what I long for longs for me back," he whispered, "it would change everything. Not just for me, but for you as well." Ellie swallowed, her mind racing with the reality of his words. Every rule she had ever known, every expectation pressed upon her, seemed to dissolve in that moment. And yet, the palace, the engagement, the ceremony, the crown, loomed like a shadow at the edge of her mind. The pond reflected their faces, their closeness, and the unspoken promise lingering in the morning air. She could see herself in his eyes, not as a princess bound by obligation, but as a woman daring to step beyond her own boundaries. "Then," she said softly, leaning a fraction closer, "let us not think of what must be, only what is." Rune's breath hitched, the faintest shiver running through his shoulder where her hand brushed against him. For a heartbeat, they remained poised between choice and desire, between duty and longing. The forest seemed to recognize the significance of the moment, the leaves rustling as if in approval, the sunlight breaking through in streaks of brilliance across the water. A faint breeze lifted Ellie's hair, brushing her cheek against Rune's, and for the first time, the possibility of love that dared not speak its name felt real, tangible in the warmth of proximity, in the shared glance that lingered longer than propriety allowed. Yet the distant toll of palace bells reminded them both of the world outside this sanctuary. Ellie's stomach twisted, knowing their time was fleeting. She rose, brushing the dirt from her skirts, though her eyes remained locked with Rune's. "Promise me," she said, voice tight with emotion, "that we will return here. That this place, this day, will not be forgotten." Rune's hand hovered over hers, not touching, yet full of intent. "I promise, Ellie. No matter what the world demands, no matter the crowns or obligations, this, us, will remain." They stood together in silence, the pond rippling beneath the golden light, reflecting the dawn of something that could not yet be named. Ellie knew that the forest, Rune, and this stolen morning were fragile gifts, delicate as the petals that floated on the water. But she would cling to them, storing the memory in the part of her heart that no throne or ceremony could touch. For a moment longer, they allowed themselves the illusion of eternity. Before the forest trail curved ahead, beckoning them deeper into secrecy, and the distant bells reminded Ellie that soon the crown would call her back to the life she had tried to escape. And in that moment, walking beside Rune on the river trail, she felt something she had never known before. The exhilarating, terrifying certainty that her heart was no longer hers alone. It belonged, in some small way, to another. The forest trail widened as Ellie and Rune walked deeper into the heart of Veloria's hidden woods. Sunlight now poured through the canopy in shimmering golden beams, dust motes dancing like tiny stars around them. Each step brought them farther from the palace and closer to a world that existed solely for the two of them. A world where neither crowns nor ceremonies could intrude. Ahead, the trees opened into a meadow that seemed untouched by time. Wildflowers swayed gently, brushing against one another like whispers in the wind. The air was warm and perfumed, heavy with jasmine, honeysuckle, and the faint scent of wet earth. A soft hum of bees and the distant song of a lark filled the clearing, as though the forest itself approved of their presence. Ellie paused at the edge, her hands brushing the tall grass. "I've never been here," she whispered, awe threading her voice. Her eyes widened as she took in the vibrant colors, the endless sky above, and the sense of freedom pressing against her chest. Rune stepped beside her, his expression soft, almost reverent. "Few have," he said. "This meadow is my secret, a place to breathe when the world feels too heavy. I wanted to share it with you." Ellie turned to him, eyes bright with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, a spark that had been growing since the pond. "Thank you," she said, voice low, "for everything, for this moment." They walked slowly into the center of the meadow, the grass brushing against Ellie's skirts, petals caressing her fingertips. Sunlight fell across Rune's features, highlighting the lines of his jaw, the strength in his shoulders, and the quiet intensity in his eyes. Each glance he gave her seemed to carry a weight of longing he had restrained for years, a silent confession that now hovered in the golden light between them. Rune knelt suddenly, plucking a single blade of grass. He worked it carefully between his fingers, weaving it with a patience that mirrored his quiet nature. Ellie watched him, curiosity piqued, as he shaped it into a delicate ring, each twist precise and deliberate. "This," he said softly, holding the fragile creation toward her, "is a crown for the heart. Not for the palace, not for ceremony. For you, for this moment, and for whatever we might hold in secret." Ellie's fingers trembled as she accepted the tiny ring, sliding it onto her own finger. It was fragile, impossibly small, yet it carried a weight far greater than gold or jewels ever could. Her heart swelled with emotion, a mixture of exhilaration, fear, and the dizzying sweetness of being understood. "You didn't have to," she whispered, her voice thick. "I wanted to," Rune replied, his gaze locking with hers. "Because this is ours. And even if the world tries to take you, even if tomorrow calls you back to duty, this..." He gestured at the meadow, the sun, the ring, the moment. Will always be ours. Ellie stepped closer, the warmth of the sun and Rune's presence wrapping around her like a protective cloak. Her fingers brushed against his hand, lingering longer than necessary. The air between them seemed to pulse with a quiet intensity, a magnetic force neither could resist. "Rune," she began, voice trembling, "what if we could stay here forever?" He shook his head gently, a faint, wistful smile on his lips. "Then we would defy everything that has ever been expected of us." And yet, his eyes softened, the vulnerability in them exposing the depth of his feelings. "I would choose it, in a heartbeat." The words hung in the air, as real and fragile as the ring on her finger. Ellie felt a tear escape, warm and sudden, tracing down her cheek. She brushed it away quickly, not wanting to break the magic of the moment. Rune reached out, his thumb brushing lightly across her cheek, a gesture of care and quiet reverence. The meadow seemed to hold its breath. Flowers leaned closer, the wind stilled, and even the distant forest seemed to hush in anticipation. Ellie tilted her head, meeting Rune halfway, their foreheads touching, a fragile connection that spoke volumes. No words were necessary. None could capture the gravity of what passed between them. The air itself seemed charged with the promise of love. Forbidden, fragile, yet undeniable. They remained there, still and quiet, as though time had paused to honor the depth of the bond forming in the heart of the meadow. Each heartbeat was amplified, each breath shared in tandem, their closeness both comforting and excruciatingly intimate. Ellie felt the ache of longing she had carried for so long, finally answered in the presence of the man who had quietly held her heart without demanding it. After a long, suspended moment, Rune spoke again, voice barely above a whisper. "Ellie, promise me something. No matter what happens tomorrow, no matter the crowns, the ceremonies, or the expectations, remember this. Remember us. Remember this day, this meadow, this feeling." Ellie nodded, her fingers tightening around the grass ring. "I promise," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "I will never forget." A faint breeze lifted her hair, brushing across Rune's shoulder. He took her hand in his, their fingers intertwining naturally, and for a moment, the outside world ceased to exist. Here, in the golden meadow, with wildflowers swaying around them, Ellie allowed herself to imagine a life where they could remain unbound, unclaimed by duty, free to follow the desires of their hearts. But even in this sanctuary, the distant echo of palace bells carried faintly through the trees. Ellie's pulse quickened, the reminder of reality intruding on the perfect illusion of freedom. She tightened her grip on Rune's hand, drawing strength from his presence, knowing that this stolen morning was a gift, fleeting, precious, and entirely theirs. Rune leaned closer, resting his forehead against hers, a gesture both tender and possessive. "No matter where you go, Ellie, you will always carry a part of me, and I will carry you, always." Ellie closed her eyes, letting the warmth of his words and the sun-washed meadow envelop her. She felt the bittersweet ache of knowing their time together was limited, yet the joy of having this stolen moment, a love unspoken yet profoundly understood, filled her with a warmth that would linger far beyond the walls of the palace. For one golden, eternal heartbeat, Ellie and Rune existed in a world of their own making. Two souls bound not by crown or duty, but by the quiet, unyielding pull of the heart. The meadow behind them slowly faded as Ellie and Rune retraced the narrow forest trail. The wildflowers, golden in the late morning sun, swayed gently in the breeze, as if waving goodbye to the stolen joy that had blossomed between them. Each step brought them closer to the edge of the forest, closer to the world they had escaped, the palace, the ceremony, and the crown that demanded Ellie's presence. Ellie's heart ached with a mixture of exhilaration and dread. The stolen morning had given her a taste of freedom, a taste of love unrestrained by duty or expectation. But reality pressed close, heavy as the palace gates that waited ahead. She glanced at Rune, whose gaze was steady, but whose jaw tightened slightly, betraying the inner turmoil he concealed. The forest, once alive with whispers and songs, seemed to fall silent around them. The only sound was the soft crunch of their footsteps on the dirt path and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. Even the birds were hushed, as though they too recognized the gravity of this final walk. Ellie's fingers brushed against Rune's hand, seeking comfort, warmth, and courage. "Rune," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't want this to end. Not like this. Not ever." Rune's thumb traced slow, gentle circles across the back of her hand. "I know," he said softly, his voice low, carrying both tenderness and sorrow. "I wish it didn't have to. But the palace, your duties, they will not wait. And neither can I." A shiver ran through Ellie, though it was not from cold. She looked up at him, her eyes searching, desperate. "Will we see each other again?" Rune paused, his hand lingering near hers. "I don't know," he admitted. "The world outside this forest will not allow it easily, but I will carry you with me, Ellie. Always. And you will carry me in the same way, I hope." The path curved sharply, opening into a stretch bordered by towering oaks whose shadows stretched like long fingers across the ground. Here, the light dimmed, soft and dappled, and the forest seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. Rune stopped, gently turning Ellie to face him. Their eyes locked, the weight of unspoken words pressing heavily in the air between them. "I wish I could tell you everything," Rune murmured. "Every thought, every feeling I've kept hidden. But some things belong only to moments like this." Ellie swallowed hard, her chest tightening. "Then tell me what you can," she said, her voice barely audible. "Tell me what I need to remember." Rune reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His touch lingered, tender and deliberate. "I remember the first time I saw you in these woods," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "You were laughing, chasing butterflies, unaware of everything else, and even then, my heart was yours. I just didn't know it." Ellie felt warmth rise to her cheeks, tears threatening, but she blinked them back. "And now?" she asked softly. "Now," Rune said, his voice catching slightly. "I still feel the same. Only now. I can't act on it. Not fully. The world will not allow it. But it is yours, Ellie. Always yours, if only in memory." A gust of wind swept through the path, rustling leaves and lifting strands of her hair. Ellie reached out instinctively, pressing her hand to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. "Then I will carry it," she whispered. Us. Always." They remained like that for a long moment, foreheads touching, breaths mingling, the forest holding them in suspended time. It was a farewell, yes, but also a promise, a silent vow that whatever awaited beyond these trees, whatever demands pulled them apart, this connection would endure. The distant toll of palace bells rang sharply, breaking the fragile cocoon around them. Ellie flinched, a shiver running down her spine. The sound was a summons, a reminder that she could no longer linger in this stolen world. The crown waited for her. The life she had tried to escape pressed closer with every passing second. Rune stepped back slightly, his hands reluctantly releasing hers. "The world is calling you, Ellie," he said, his voice firm yet tender. "Go, be who you must be, and promise me you will not forget." "I promise," she said, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. "I will never forget this, never forget you." He bowed his head, a gesture of quiet reverence and love. Then slowly he straightened, allowing her to step forward. Each step toward the edge of the forest was heavy, a tug at her soul as though the very ground wished to hold her. She glanced back once, catching Rune's silhouette framed by the golden light filtering through the oaks. His eyes met hers, unwavering, full of longing, strength, and sorrow. The forest behind them seemed to exhale as she crossed the final stretch of shadows. The bells grew louder, the palace closer. Ellie's chest ached with the weight of her duties, yet warmed with the memory of the stolen moments. The pond, the meadow, the hand she had held in a world where only they existed. Rune remained at the edge of the path, his figure rooted to the spot, a steadfast sentinel of their shared secret. Ellie's steps carried her forward, but her heart remained in the forest, tethered to him in ways neither crown nor ceremony could sever. Before the last ray of golden light fell behind the treetops, Rune raised his hand in a silent farewell. Ellie returned the gesture, pressing a hand to her chest, storing the warmth of their love, their connection, and their courage within her. And as the palace gates loomed ahead demanding her return to a life of duty and obligation, Ellie walked forward with her head high, a quiet smile gracing her lips. Inside, she carried the meadow, the pond, and Rune, a love that could not exist in the open, but would endure in memory, in whispers, and in the quiet corners of her heart forever.